Now a COVID recap of a few highlights from this week. Our Mariah Gallegos covers an explainer of city numbers, beach restrictions, schools with COVID cases, and state tracking. Mariah?
City officials explained this week how the state data dump impacted our county numbers. We saw a spike in cases last weekend with an additional nearly 1,000 cases in just one day, some of those cases dating back to as early as July. The Texas Department of Health Services told 3 News the data dump is coming from a private testing lab, and now with the help of a new system called Texas Health Trace Develop, the state is catching up. Public Health Director Annette Rodriguez says they're working with the state to make sure numbers are not delayed.
To keep up with this every day is taking some time. And so what we're saying is we're separating them to say everybody knows these numbers came in from the state. These are the numbers that we have. We're trying to figure out where they actually go.
In an effort to keep our COVID numbers low locally, Nueces County Judge Barbara Canales restricted beach vehicle access.
So I believe that this beach order has served its purpose. It's reduced the massive crowds at a critical time in our period.
That order expires Monday. However, the curfew will still be in effect from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now, an update on our schools. One local district made an announcement on their social media page. 2 Ingleside varsity football players tested positive for the virus after returning for strength and conditioning nearly 2 weeks ago. The district says they will continue with athletic scheduled programs and continue taking safety precautions. As families and teachers enter their second week of school, some returning to the classrooms, we learned that the state of Texas isn't tracking COVID cases in schools. Currently, schools are required to notify local health departments if someone tests positive, but the state is not collecting and tracking those cases separately. We will continue to keep you updated on that. The TEA said they are working with the Department of State Health Services to find a solution. For now, Mariah Gallegos, 3 News.